News Review. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and welcome to another conversation about Africa as seen in the Western media. And with me, as usual, are my two co-conspirators, as they would say. Now is Aya Fubara Eneli Esq, author Kwanzaa A Celebration, host Rethinking Freedom, 98.5 FM Killeen, Texas, and co-host of Women and Resistance. Welcome, sister.
Thank you so much.
And the gentleman, where do we even begin? Well, host Black Star News, WBAI 99.5 FM, New York, author of Manufacturing Hate, Comrade Milton Allimadi.
Asante sana. Karibu. Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome. So let's get into it. News where you're at, please. Let's begin with the good comrade.
Go ahead, sister.
Oh, I thought he was starting with you.
Well, we are all comrades.
Well, the news continues with the upcoming primary elections in Texas. And we have some very important races coming up. One of, I think, the most important ones in Texas is who will be the Democratic representative for Senate. And then also on the Republican side, whether it would be Ken Paxton, who had gone through impeachment in the Senate here, and despite overwhelming evidence of all his wrongdoings, was cleared nonetheless. And he's running against Senator Cornyn, who is definitely a Trump supporter, a MAGA white nationalist. But he's incredibly enough to the left of Ken Paxton, who made his career suing Biden every step of the way for every single thing. And so it'll be interesting to see who the Republicans choose in light of everything that's going on, just how far they want to go. And there's definitely blood in the water. And we've seen how vicious Republicans are to each other when they decide to primary someone that they feel Trump has not supported. I have not checked to see whether Trump has come out and endorsed Paxton, although I would expect that he would, because his politics are definitely even more so aligned with Trump than Cornyn, who every once in a while will vote as though he is a human being. So that's on the Republican side. And then, of course, on the Democratic side, we have James Tallarico versus Jasmine Crockett. Some of you may have seen Jasmine Crockett, the congresswoman, recently speaking about the murder of Renee Good and getting emotional about it. Emotions are things that we all have and should have, otherwise we become robots. And there was more outrage because she, in using a quote, used the F-bomb. There was more outrage about that F-bomb versus the actual murder of a woman who posed no threat to these modern day Ku Klux Klan members parading as ICE. People should really ask themselves why law enforcement requires masks, why they have masks on and are obscuring their identity. And James Tallarico happens to be a white male. He happens to quote scripture a lot. He does fight for humanity, but we see racism and misogyny at play. And again, it will be interesting to see whether, in spite of how much work Jasmine Crockett has already done in Congress, in the US Congress, whether enough of us are invested enough in what's going on to, one, come out and vote, because the primaries don't usually have a great turnout, and two, whether we're going to choose her as the candidate to represent us or whether we're going to choose James Talarico, who is male and white and quote unquote Christian and maybe more palatable to some palates. So.
Okay, good comrade.
All right, so sisters touched on the other issue also that I wanted to mention, actually, the execution. So I don't have to say much about that, except for the fact that, so it was obvious that something like this was going to happen at some point.
Okay.
We just didn't know which city it would be. But because when you give, as Sister said, you're allowed to cover, so that you're not identifiable or recognizable, like bandits do when they're about to, rob a bank, correct?
Yeah.
And the language, the license to kill, the rhetoric that is coming from the administration, it was just a question of time. Now there are two things. Are they going to learn any lesson from this? And the answer is obviously no. You've heard what the president himself said. Complete falsehood that they were literally coming toward him to kill, this ICE agent. So the answer is no, which means, unfortunately, we're going to see more of this kind of incident. And then at some point, there would be consequences. There will be some sort of implosion. Because I doubted that people are just going to be watching people getting shot point blank, cold-blooded killing multiple times, and that nothing would happen. So that's the observation I wanted to make. And also, I just want to give a heads up, of course, that I told you earlier to our esteemed viewers and listeners that at some point I may have to leave prematurely because I have somebody who's in hospital. So when that person calls, I may have to leave today's podcast. So I just don't want listeners and viewers to be surprised by that. All right, thank you. I'm ready.
Oh, okay.
I should note this, that although Renee Good's death, rightfully so, has been publicized in the way that it was, I should say her murder, that she, I believe, is the 23rd person killed by ICE. That is not to include those who have died in detention under all kinds of circumstances that are not being investigated, and that there is no transparency with where people are taken, how they are treated, whether they get the medical care that they need.
Good point.
So people are being murdered. We heard the recording from the ICE agent himself, who was recording on his personal phone, not even on the body cam, what is going on there. And after shooting her, he called her an effing bitch.
Right.
And you hear all the venom and the vitriol. And if you have ever been in a domestic violence situation or know people who have, you can hear that rage when a person feels they are losing control.
Okay, very good. I'm glad you said that, because now what we need to do is examine some of his past interactions, not only with the public, but even at home. So I'm glad you brought that out. That's very critical.
Yeah. And one of the audience, Peggy Miller, also said, don't forget the young man that was killed in California by an off-duty ICE agent after he heard them shooting in celebration in the street.
Yeah, just executed him. There's another young man who was the father of 2 young children, and he was shot in the neck. I believe Attorney Merritt is on that case and is leading the investigation. And the fact that the federal government is refusing to cooperate with local law enforcement.
Just think about that.
Icing out, pun intended, the state apparatus, the local apparatus, because this is all a cover-up. So the ICE is basically, the way I see it, Trump's personal army.
Of course.
Sent out
to enforce.
his laws, and he has made it clear he is a law unto himself, not the U.S. Constitution, not international law. The only morality that counts is whatever he thinks. And if any of you watched the latest his meeting with the oil executives,
hold on to that. Hold on to that.
Meeting, he gets up, walks over to the window, loses his train of thought, starts talking about a view, so on and so forth, after claiming that they've pledged $100 billion, and these executives, to their credit, sitting in the room saying we pledge no such thing, and we have no intentions of going into Venezuela.
Right. Here's my prediction. This is not an easy job. I think we discussed this previously, and I said it's not an easy job. No matter how laid back you want to be, there's some decisions you have to make personally. You're going to be woken up at odd hours. At this level, it's going to be very difficult to continue for 3 years. You're already seeing the stress, the consequences of the stress. You're seeing it manifested. Okay. Okay. Unfortunately, here's the call coming. I'm sorry, guys.
Okay. And that's so unfortunately, you won't have to join us any further, but we are in capable hands, and the sister and I will pass through today's stories. So speaking of which, let's go to the first, and it's from the BBC, and it's that this gentleman has survived another attempt on his life. So the BBC reports that plot to kill Burkina Faso leader foiled, said Hunter. It goes in a little bit further. It says a plot to kill Burkina Faso's military leader, Captain Ibrahim Traore, has been thwarted. The West African nation has announced the sophisticated plan had been hatched by Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Damiba, the military officer ousted by Traore in September 2022, the security minister said in a late-night broadcast. I'll just read this quote. Our intelligence services intercepted the operation in the final hours. They had planned to assassinate the head of state and strike other key institutions, including civilian personalities, said Mahamadou Sana, further alleging that the plot had been funded by neighboring Ivory Coast, or Côte d'Ivoire, as they choose to be called. So, sister, when you read the story, what were your thoughts and your initial thoughts, and then what you came away with?
Well, we know that this ongoing fight for Africa did not start today. I think part of the reason that you don't see more uprising, more quote unquote resistance, rebellion in this way, as they would couch it, is because of the way that they fight back. Whether we look at Sankara, Lumumba, Steve Biko, Milton Cabral, Walter Rodney, Malcolm X in the United States, Hampton, we can go on and on and on, that whenever we rise up and fight for our liberation, although they will tout, give me liberty or give me death, liberation is only for white people. But when Black, brown people, when women rise up and say, we want our liberation, we will take our liberation, they come at us with all forces. So beyond a shadow of a doubt, he understands that these attacks will be ongoing. We know from history that typically they find people within our own communities that for whatever reasons they're able to use as puppets to carry out their will. And I'm glad that he survived this. It's not the first coup attempt, not the first, attempt on his life that he has survived. Unfortunately, there are probably going to be more, and I am just praying for his safety.
I mean, to add a bit of background to what you just said, yes, this was not the first one. It certainly won't be the last. And the reason is his mentor, or the person he looks up to, Thomas Sankara, actually survived 5. And the fact that when they finally got to him, the call also came from Côte d'Ivoire. And then it was the French intelligence network using the man next to him, Blaise Compaoré, who happened to be his best friend, his father's adopted son, who will do that to him. He was also Blaise Compaoré's best man at his wedding.
Wow.
Which, I mean, yeah, which also happened in Côte d'Ivoire. The wedding happened in Côte d'Ivoire. Blaise Compaoré at the time was married to the niece of the Côte d'Ivoire president, Félix Houphouët-Boigny. And so Compaoré and Sankara went there, and the rest, as they say, was history. October 15, 1987, he would execute his coup, assassinate his friend, and then had the temerity to dump his friend in a refuse bin. It was the people that gathered the body and dug graves that buried, that buried Thomas Sankara. So his final resting place was not his initial resting place. It was only when this government came in and decided, you know what, we have to give him a befitting burial, that it was relocated. And we've seen history of this across Africa. We talk about Patrice Lumumba earlier, Muammar Gaddafi, CV Olympio in Togo, who again was a coup was organized, financed by the French. He escaped into the American embassy at the time. The Americans pushed him out, and he was assassinated in the streets. So what can we think of that? Well, and
what I would say to all of us, you know, because again, talk is cheap, and Traoré is an example of someone who's putting his literal life on the line. Yeah. And some might say this is easier, you know, said than done. Easy for me to say this, speaking from the comfort of my home in Texas. But here's the deal. None of us is going to live forever.
Of course not.
And the question is, are we going to live standing, die standing, or are we going to live and die on our knees? In the sense of kowtowing, appealing to the morality of people who have shown you over and over again they have no morality. And of course, what we see, you look at Steve Biko, for instance, you look at Thomas Sankara that we've evoked a number of times today, many others that we've shared over the year when we talk about issues of Africa, is that you may kill the body, you may kill the person, you may dissolve the body and all we have left is a tooth, but you do not kill, you cannot kill the spirit, you cannot kill the idea. So Thomas Sankara lives on. Yep. And so for any of us who are afraid, there are times, you know, my family will say, oh my gosh, you know, be quiet. You know, my mother will call me, hey, listen, with what they're doing, you know, be quiet, don't say anything. And Audre Lorde has told us that our silence, so as Zora Neale Hurston, our silence is not going to save us.
Correct.
And so, you know, whether I die at 100, having lived a very meek life where I just did whatever my oppressors wanted me to do and I had no agency, or whether I died before my 55th birthday and I stood for something, I would take standing for something, because that fight and that death actually becomes a seed that grows and can produce fruit in a different way, in terms of our long-term liberation. But I do not want to forever just be a slave, a willing slave.
And sometimes it's all you have is your voice. So if you mute yourself, what uses said voice to humanity? You have to try as much as possible to not only read, but also give voice to what you feel, to what you know is not just. This guy has basically been at the tip of the spear for literally the last 3 years he's been there. Every other year, there has been an attempt on him. And so one would ask the question, why him? Well, if you think of the spider web, sometimes it's the joints that is the key part. You just need to cut the key part and then the entire web just breaks apart. So he is playing his role, which is the Sahel states are effectively telling you this is what is possible if you kick out neocolonial interest. And the neocolonial interest would not want a successful model or an example to anybody that has such aspirations of liberation. Because the moment you can see that something has worked somewhere, it becomes a template, and they cannot allow that happen. And worse still, France is bearing the brunt of it. You've got three of them there, literally holding the economy of Spain by the jugular. You've got uranium, you've got gold, and you've got gold in both of them, in Burkina Faso and Mali, and you've got uranium, energy source, to the French economy. Basically now, looking elsewhere for it, and they would have to pay a premium.
As they cycle through prime ministers.
Thank you very much. Which the great ancestor, John Henry Clark, would often say, Africa has stuff that nobody wants to pay for. So that said, any final thoughts on that story?
Again, our silence will not save us. As a matter of fact, if you stay silent, they kill you and tell you that you liked it, and there's no evidence. We haven't spoken up to tell our own stories or to say where we stood on the issues. And so speak up in the ways that you can. I'm not telling anyone to go and sacrifice their lives, so to speak, but it's also examining what kind of lives we're living if we will not speak for truth. And if we cannot stand for truth, how do we expect allies, talk less of our enemies, to care about us? If we don't care about ourselves enough to fight, we say Black Lives Matter. If we don't care enough about our lives, if we don't see that our lives matter enough to fight for it, to put something on the line, to sacrifice whatever our comforts are, then we should not at all be surprised when other people disregard us or treat us as they would say, no humans involved.
No humans involved, or sometimes exterminate all brutes, as they would say. For our next story, we go to the German outlet, Deutsche Welle, and it reads, Maduro's capture, put a pin in that, sparks African debate. African leaders weigh sovereignty, international law, and strategic interest after the US seized Venezuela president, put another pin in that, seized Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, and flew him out of the country. The US military pre-dawn attack on Venezuela on Saturday and the capture of put another pin in that, leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, over alleged drug offenses prompted a swift response from the African Union, where the African Union called upon all parties to exercise restraint responsibility for international law to prevent any escalation and preserve regional peace and stability, it said in a statement on the situation in Venezuela. But there was one key thing I wanted us to focus on. It now said strategic ties trumped public condemnation. Nigeria has been relatively quiet, not denouncing US action, so DW. Same thing for Egypt, Ethiopia, Kenya, he said, and even governments which had a history of some form of anti-imperialist rhetoric, like Namibia, for example, have been pretty quiet. So South Africa, on the other hand, which Trump has accused of alleged discrimination and even genocide of minority white Africans, called the US military action a grave violation of international law. So the question is, what should be Africa's response, and why has it been so baited?
Well, I ran out of pins. You kept saying put a pin in that, and I ran out of pins.
Okay, so let's take the pins out.
Address your pins, because I ran out of pins.
So when they say when the news media said, where is it? Where's the first pin? The first pin is the capture. The second pin is seized. The third pin is authoritarian. And the fourth and final one is, where was it? Yeah, legitimate presidents. Okay, so do you want to have a go at them? Or do you want me to explain why I said put pins in them?
Well, we have something called habeas corpus under the U.S. law, and so when you go back to that very top, the title.
Okay, the title says
Capture sparks
African debates.
We're talking about a sovereign leader not charged in international court. At least that was not the basis for quote unquote this capture. You use your domestic laws, which international law says that there is a law against charging and diplomats, foreign leaders in that sense, with your own domestic laws going into their country. You didn't say kidnap, because all of these things have different connotations and legally mean different things. It's just we captured him. Meanwhile, let's just be clear. Netanyahu flies in and out of the United States, comes to the White House, Congress, Mar-a-Lago at will.
Goes for
certainly
walks.
has been accused of committing war crimes. We see all the evidence.
International
it's not
warrant.
an allegation. He's not quote unquote captured, but you have these trumped up charges against, and I'm not defending Maduro and his suppression and oppression of his people, but you go in and you kidnap him and his wife. You brutalize his wife and then say she ran into a door.
Yeah.
And somehow this is the title that comes up. And then when it's saying that African leaders are weighing sovereignty and international law and strategic interests, I'm not really sure what the basis of that statement is, because I really haven't seen any evidence that publicly that they are weighing anything. We see the strident comments that came out of South Africa, but that is really the only African country that has really come out and strongly opposed what is happening. And so I don't know what debate it's saying that African leaders are having weighing sovereignty. I think when you go back to the creation of the African Union, which I believe was in 1968.
63.
At that point, what African leaders did in opposition to Kwame Nkrumah and his vision of a United States of Africa was they essentially codified what happened in the Berlin Conference. They essentially accepted the arbitrary carving up of Africa and decided these are the rules within which we will operate. And we have been at a disadvantage ever since. And so what debate on sovereignty are you possibly going to have now when you cannot work as a collective? And as we are saying this, mind you, Rubio and Trump have been very active, not just signing this so-called peace deal in the Sudan, but also in now signing 14 memorandums signing memorandums of memoranda of understanding with 14 African countries.
Okay.
And so as if Comrade Milton was here, he would start off by saying, we have no sovereignty, we have no independence. So just to begin there, what are you people talking about? But please carry on. Why did you put a pin in it?
Okay, yes. So you actually went there. So let me stop sharing. When you said they signed a memorandum of understanding, let's look at the quote unquote the invasion and violation of Venezuela's sovereignty. When Trump went in there, they didn't hide why they went in there. What did they say? They said the oil, and they have companies ready to go in. Where does that sound familiar? It sounds familiar in Africa because, as you said, the Berlin Conference, which happened 1884, between November 1884 to February 1885, we're actually in the longest month in the course of said meeting, where Africa was effectively carved out. But here is the kicker that most people do not focus on. It was carved out so that those countries can sell concessions to companies to come into Africa and exploit. That is where you have your Royal African Company, your East African Company, your British South African Company, Cecil Rhodes, which gives us the Bears that has the only company that has the right in the world to sell diamonds. You had, now, the United States is doing the same thing in Venezuela, hoping that American companies will go in to exploit the oil in Venezuela. And what did the chief executive said? We have no interest in going there to exploit said oil. Why? Because they know not only is that oil difficult to invest in, you would need a lengthy timeline in order to make it viable. And here is the part that is often hidden away from the world. In 1976, when the oil in Venezuela was nationalized, it was nationalized after a referendum with the people. I repeat, it was a referendum that was given to the people, and the people said we would nationalize it. When Hugo Chavez came in 1998, he gave the companies a reversed deal because the deal at the time was basically so lopsided in the interest of the foreign interest that he called for a renegotiation, and they did. Every one of those companies sat with their deal. Only one company in 1998 signed a deal of continuance, and that was Chevron. The rest of them left. So when Trump said they took our oil, it is a figment of his imagination. Now, how does that come into Africa? We've seen in the last couple of months when we've been doing stories here of companies mining gold in Mali, in Burkina Faso, the uranium in Niger, the oil in Mozambique, oil and gas in Mozambique. But every time these people try to assert their independence or their ownership of the resources, the countries scream. But it's not really the companies screaming. It's the shareholders of these concessionary companies who are screaming. So Africa, when Africa is talking about independence, you're not really independent because you have no control over these concessionary companies. So when he said most of these countries were quiet, Kenya, Ethiopia, Nigeria, what he's effectively saying is they're beholden to those concessionary companies. And as long as those concessionary companies hold licensing in those countries, they're not going to speak as one voice. So over to you, sis.
Yeah, so just really quickly, I do want to say this for those who might be interested in the legal aspects of this. And as I stated before, Trump has already told us he doesn't care about international law. And so just think about your family or where you work. If there are absolutely no guidelines and one person or some people just get to do whatever they want, just how much chaos, how much pain and suffering will that inflict on everybody else. So just some of the international laws that were violated with this quote unquote capture really is kidnapping of Maduro and his wife, brutalization of his wife. UN Charter Article 2.4 prohibits has a prohibition on use of force, that states must refrain from the threat or use of force against territorial integrity or political independence. Means nothing to Trump. Not just African countries haven't said much. The European Union has not said much.
I'll come to the European Union after you
all
finish.
of these other countries have not said much. Like, really, the world has been silent on this, right? There was more outrage when Russia invaded Ukraine than with what is going on right now with Venezuela. Or even just openly saying, yeah, we're going to extract their resources, and the money realized is not even going through, and Americans are not even paying attention to this. It's not even coming in. I thought it was America first. It's not even coming into the coffers of the US Treasury. No, he said it out loud, which is why some of you love him. He's a strong man. He says what he believes. He said it out loud. I will control the money, and the money is going to be put in offshore accounts. Really, people? Really? This grifter, this felon who has unpaid bills all around the place, over 21 credible people accusing him of some of sexual abuse, sexual assaults, whatever. This is who we're just going along with. And again, I will see how people choose to vote in the primaries, or whether they're just like, this is fine with us. Okay, so another UN law, UN Charter Article 2.1.2.7, customary non-intervention. Sovereign equality, no coercive intervention in another state's domestic affairs. Of course, we saw France and Nigeria insert themselves into the affairs of Benin.
Republic. Yeah.
No comment, right? We just, so the people, if they rise up and say, we don't want our leaders anymore, outside influences can come in and say, no, this is who we're keeping in place, which is why maybe Museveni is still there. All right, and Kagame, and we can go on. Biya, so on. UN Charter Article 51, self-defense limits. Force allowed only if an armed attack occurs. Venezuela did not attack anybody. If anything, we saw video of civilians just being murdered in the Pacific Ocean, right? Yep. Again, very little outrage about that. There's another law, customary international law, head of state immunity. Sitting heads of states generally enjoy personal immunity from foreign jurisdiction while in office. Now, I don't even know how Flores got roped into this. And the three charges they have against her, one was owning weapons.
Yeah.
Machine guns and other weapons. And another one was conspiracy to access weapons. And I'm going, wait a second. I thought America is all about the Second Amendment and everybody's rights to bear arms. So how is she being charged if she really did own? Why is she not allowed to own arms in her own country, no less? Okay. Another law, ICCPR, and U.S. is a party to this group. The arbitrary detention and due process norms. No arbitrary detention is allowed. Fair process and legal basis is required. So how did you become the judge, executioner, everything, and we're just going to go kill however many dozens of Cuban
commit murder in the course of
Cuban military men, I guess, who were guarding the president, bomb some other facilities in Venezuela that is not being widely reported, and quote unquote detain the president and his wife, a sitting president and his wife. There's another law, aggression. Aggression is the most serious form of illegal force. Legal treatment depends on forum and jurisdiction. So you just bypassed all of the international law institutions and just decided, I am a law unto myself. I have the military capability paid for by us, the taxpayers, and I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to. And literally, Trump is saying, who's going to check me, boo? And so far, definitely the African leaders have said, not us, and the rest of the world, to a great degree, so far. We'll see how it plays out, but so far as saying, not us either.
And I want to also add this. We do a lot of reframing the narrative on here. Another narrative that we need to also help excise is the fact that if you listen to the Western media and when they're reporting on Venezuela, they will often say this. They will say, oh, look at their infrastructure. They ran it into the ground. They can't even maintain their own stuff. How are you going to maintain it when you literally had sanctions on Venezuela since 1998? I repeat, you've had sanctions on Venezuela since 1998. How do you expect the country to go out knowing that they use the international currency, which is the dollar, which the US Treasury, through said sanctions, holds over the head of anybody that deals with them? So how do you go out and buy anything?
Same argument for Cuba. You basically punish them, put an embargo, you punish any countries that try to trade with them, and then you turn around and say, oh, look, they're so impoverished, they're so backward, they don't have this, and they don't, yes.
So you begin to see...
though America, if there was an embargo on America for even one Christmas, how many of the gifts that you got, that you bought, that you gave were made in this United States? And if you couldn't import, right now, the CEO of Ford is saying that they have over 5,000 mechanic jobs. They are offering $120,000 pay for those jobs, and they cannot find Americans to fill those jobs.
There you go.
So if there's an embargo, you can't bring in your steel, you can't, all the things that America purchases, how long will it take for America's infrastructure as well to become outdated and backward? I mean, it already is in many places, which is why Biden had the infrastructure bill, but we're not going to argue that today.
Now, and also going back to when you mentioned the European Union has largely been silent, with the exception of Spain, and even Spain qualified it. Spain said, although Maduro is not our cup of tea, this was a violation. Russia also, obviously, because of its adversarial nature, said this is clear violation and should not be allowed to stand. But I am curious about the United Kingdom government, which went out of his way to actually help them stop a ship that was laden with oil leaving Venezuela, and stopping said ship in the middle of the sea. Now, when we're talking about history, this is where it becomes important. The Royal Navy did what they used to do back in the day, which was, if we cannot capture your land, anything that is going through said place or coming away from there is considered war booty. And so essentially what they did was revised the old method of sea piracy, because stopping a flagship with no international backing is essentially piracy. And again, here is where it comes back to bite them. The moment Trump started talking about Greenland, which, as regions will have it, is essentially part of Denmark, the EU then got a bit of backbone and said, oh, we're standing with Denmark. It remains to be seen because 2 weeks ago, about 10 C-17 planes, military transport planes, landed in RAF Fairfax in the UK. And hints are that is going to be used as a staging post in order to go and do whatever they need to do in Greenland. So that remains to be seen what transpired thereafter. Any final thoughts?
Let me say this to all the white nationalists. Listen, no, seriously. Go back to slavery days. If you see an enslaver who can traffic in the bodies of people, who can sneak out of his house or sometimes just walk out the front door and go brutalize an enslaved African woman and then come back to your bed, you better believe that that person is brutalizing his own flesh and blood, his own white family. We always get pulled into these white on white crimes.
Yeah.
And so for any white nationalists, for any white people who are thinking, oh, they're just going against the black and brown, get rid of those immigrants, you know, whites only, and so on and so forth. Let me tell you, if you guys would leave us alone, we will actually, quote unquote, go. And some of us are. There are some who will beg to stay and serve you. But some of us will go if you would leave us alone so we can just do our thing and live at peace.
Yeah.
But you can't leave us alone. But if you ever did, guess what you're going to do? You guys are going to turn on each other because the evil knows no bounds. And so for white nationalists who initially was, oh, no, he's just fighting immigrants, you know, these black people, these Mexicans, these whatever, these shithole countries. Now they're coming for Greenland. He's talked about Canada. He wants to be president of the universe. And all of you need to bow down to him, regardless of your skin color, including, what's her name in Venezuela, who is wanting to share her Nobel Prize.
Maria Machado. Maria Machado.
Machado wants to share her Nobel Prize with Trump. And the Nobel Prize Committee, who I don't know how they came up with that decision to give her the prize to begin with, but now they've put out a statement saying, no, the prize cannot be shared, transferred, so on and so forth, given away, so on and so forth. But just the mentality, I guess she considers her white skin is going to save her with Trump. But I think that there's a bigger issue here that I want to touch on just briefly, because I know we have other articles to look at.
Yeah.
What Trump also did this past week is he withdrew the United States from 35 United Nations organizations, 31 United Nations organizations, and I believe 35 non-UN organizations.
Correct, yeah.
I don't know how many of us really paid attention to that strategy that his international strategy that he laid out. There's a document you can go read in December of 2025. But basically, his reasoning for pulling the United States out of all of these organizations is it does not align with their anti-woke and their anti-diversity initiatives.
Yep.
So very quickly, I just wanted to run through not all, but just some of the organizations that the United States is now pulled out of. So United States is becoming a law unto itself. And for those of us who are still in this country who have the ability to vote, you get to actively choose, starting with the primaries, which way this country goes. Now, I know there's some of you who would say, let it implode. It's going to implode anyway, and no empire lives forever. But the question is, how much harm is done to the world and to our climate? Because regardless of all these lines we've drawn, climate issues impact us all. So it's not a matter of, do I have a passport somewhere else? Because that's not going to save me somewhere else. Some of the issues that are at play here. So they pulled out of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. They pulled out of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. They pulled out of the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. They pulled out of the Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia International. They pulled out of the International Law Commission. They pulled out of the International Residual Mechanism for criminal tribunals. Yes, because I'm a criminal. I don't want anything that is going to restrain me in any way, right? There's no longer the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa because no humans involved. They pulled out the Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General for children in armed conflict, because we don't care. We will use whomever, including children, to achieve our goals. And if their children being used as soldiers, conscripted as soldiers being trafficked, not our business, right? They pulled out of the Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General on sexual violence and conflict. Well, yeah, if you got a whole bunch of pedophiles, if you don't want to show the Epstein files, if you believe in trafficking people, why would you care about sexual violence and conflict? Okay, which is why Maduro's face is untouched, but his wife's face is brutalized. Yeah. Okay. They pulled out of the Peace Building Commission because we're the Department of War. They pulled out of the Peace Building Fund. Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. Who are they? People? They're not people. They pulled out of the UN Collaborative Program on Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation in Developing Countries because we don't give a damn. Cut it all down. But listen, anybody watch that movie? I'm not a fan of Dr. Seuss, but he wrote a book called The Lorax. And when my children were younger, we would watch The Lorax. And you see how they cut all the trees down and they're singing songs and then people have to buy oxygen and all of that. And so now you're poor, you can't even breathe, you can't live. So a program to reduce emissions from deforestation, they pulled out of because that is wokeness.
Drill, baby, drill.
Okay. They pulled out of the UN Democracy Fund. They pulled out of the 24/7 carbon-free energy compact. Of course, they pulled out of the Paris Convention already. So, hey, American companies,
free fall.
Yes, pollute, whatever, no regulations, do whatever. They pulled out of the Commission for Environmental Cooperation. They pulled out of the Education Cannot Wait organization. Like, seriously? No, because the stupider, yes, I use that word, the stupider we are, the easier it is to control us. They pulled out of the Global Counterterrorism Forum. Well, because we use terrorists to control people like ICE. They pulled out of the panel on climate change. I could go on. They pulled out of the International Institute for Justice and the Rule of Law because we need no laws. They pulled out of the International Solar Alliance, and it goes on. People, you got to look at what they're doing, and we need to stop playing games. I know we often say, don't talk about money, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion. No. If you have any sphere of influence, educate people. I went to a vision building, vision board party, and I may not get invited again, but these were a group of people. I only knew the hostess, and they made the mistake of asking me a question, and I was like, let's talk. Let's talk about your personal vision board that is not in any way connected to the reality of the world that we live in, and how you are going to look to participate in or fight for anything other than your personal comfort. And I went into some things. There was some, uncomfortable silence. Like I said, I may not get invited back, but I planted the seeds that I could. People, wake up. Wake up, everybody. I can't sing, but y'all might want to go play some Teddy Pendergrass today. All right.
Okay. Let's go into the next story, which is about democracy, actually. So it says Uganda election candidates, key issues, and what to know. This is from Deutsche Welle. And it says on January 15, this week, Uganda will elect a new president and members of parliament. DW breaks down presidential candidates, key issues, and other facts you need to know ahead of the crucial votes. It would have been good if the comrade was here, but
because he is from Uganda.
He is from Uganda, and he is also familiar with this gentleman, Bobby Wine.
And he cannot go back to Uganda right now under Museveni. So sacrifices, yes. So he's essentially an exile from his home.
Yeah. So let's pass this story. So it says President Yoweri Museveni, 81, who has been in power since 1986, put a pin in that, is running for a 7th term under the ruling National resistance movement. Wow. Women, apparently, the electorate, women constitute approximately 53% of registered voters. We hope the women are there, are part of the resistance. A candidate for president must win 50% plus one vote to avoid a runoff in the country's two-round voting system. Uganda has 353 constituencies, and it breaks it down. And so, what's your thoughts?
You know, it has been heartwarming to see some of the videos coming out of Uganda. Shout out to the journalists, because many of them are being brutalized in the process of getting word out.
Yeah.
The crowd surging at Bobby Wine's campaign rallies have been incredible. They look like, you know, football stadiums and gatherings and things like that. And it's out in the rural areas, in the bushes. You know, people are not sitting there standing. It's dust. And people are out there. Of course, we've seen videos of him being harassed. We know he was arrested. We know that Dr. Birete is right now incarcerated. They have not set bail for her because she is an election observer who was speaking truth to power. What is very concerning with Museveni is where this man started. That this man was actually a revolutionary. He was actually a freedom fighter at one point. And I really do believe that we need to study how people go from saying they believe in one thing and actually putting his life on the line. I mean, he was a guerrilla war fighter, if you will.
Yep.
And then getting into position and then being so thoroughly co-opted that you believe your way is the only way, and then you're propped up by all of these security agreements that you are making with foreign nations. Uganda is landlocked, but it's interesting to know Uganda, to the east of Uganda is Kenya, to the north is South Sudan,
to the west
is Congo, DRC, to the southwest is Rwanda, and then to the south is Tanzania. And so they really see Uganda as a very strategic nation area to be able to control what is happening in all of these other hot spots.
Yeah.
Right? Somalia isn't too far from there. So just for me, I want to even, and hopefully someone else does it, because I only have so many hours in the day. I want to study like what happens, where did he take that turn in the road, and then just decide that fighting for the liberation of his people was no longer important, and that what was paramount was him keeping power. And so again, when people don't engage in the electoral process, and we see in Uganda, at one point they had 70% of people who could vote who were participating in the electoral process, then went to 60%, and then I think it's just a little over 50% at this time. Yeah. And we can say that probably is a lot of suppression that we're seeing happening as well. But when we don't participate, then he was able to change the constitution and take off term limits.
Twice.
Then he was able to change the constitution and now say there are no age limits either. So in other words, I can be president for life because I'm always going to imprison any opposition that shows up. So as Africans, we need to just even examine this. Ella Baker, I think, might have something to say on this, to the extent that I think our religions teach us this idea of a singular savior. And so rather than build institutions, we put our hope in one person. And what that does is that person's head can either be cut off and then the movement dies, or that person can be co-opted and the movement dies because it lives in a way that is antithetical to what we want and what we believe. So The elections are on January 15th. Bobby Wine has not been arrested again, although his life is constantly under attack. The police are out there taking, you guys have to understand what America has done. America and the apartheid movement in South Africa have basically taught the rest of the world how to repress and oppress people. And so African law enforcement, that is all Black people, African people, work exactly on the African population the way the police forces work on marginalized communities
groups
here in the US.
Yep.
And so you see these videos where the police bump somebody and then turn around and beat them up. Spray tear gas in crowds for no reason at all. Yeah. I mean, they can do whatever they want, kind of like what ICE is doing. What we have done is just taken the model of the colonizers and what they used to do to us. We're now in blackface, but the actions remain the same. It is Africans brutalizing Africans.
Yeah.
So will the people be able to fight through all of this oppression and all the ways that they are going to be co-opted? They're going to buy votes. I see it in Nigeria all the time. They literally come to poor villages and say, here's a bunch of money. And if you vote this way, you get this amount of money. And when you have hungry children, when your stomach is growling, you're like, what do I care? You take the money to feed so you can live another day and you vote. And yet your very vote is ensuring that you're going to stay hungry and impoverished. So hoping for Museveni's ouster, hoping that even though since 1986, he's been able to co-opt the whole apparatus of governance, that there are enough people who finally say, I don't have to kowtow. But I don't know, because we see how Trump has been able to co-opt governance systems here in the United States of America. And you might be thinking, oh, it's just African dictators. What is happening with Museveni, Biya, all of them is happening right now in the United States of America.
Yes. And I would start by saying what Malcolm X said at one of his speeches when he said the chickens will eventually come home to roost. Gerard Horn wrote a book a couple of years ago titled White Supremacy Confronted. So where he tied what you said earlier with regards to policing in South Africa to policing in the United States. All the kinds of Jim Crow laws were actually the cornerstone of the apartheid government. Now, one of the key students...
Which by the way, the Nazis borrowed.
Yes. So one of the students that studied how suppression tactics worked is Yoweri Museveni. Yoweri Museveni, the position he fills within the African space, when you looked at where his country is, he is a basically strategic head in order to study the interest of the countries around him. He has to ensure that the stuff out of Congo is able to move. Because you have to ask the question, every time you scream that there is killing going on in Congo, but the stuff keeps getting out. I'm talking about tin, tantalum, and tungsten. They still getting out. You have to ask the question, how? Majority of the mines are in the east side of Congo. The east borders Uganda on the west. So that is where majority of the minerals get taken out of. And there is also one key part. Yoweri Museveni is a CIA asset. He is actually being supported to the tunes of about $1.5 billion every year. So him staying in power is in the interest of the United States. So
my tax money, because they're about to ask me to pay taxes again.
So I'll just end with this irony. He wrote a book in 1992. And in the book, my Views in Power, chapter 2 of that book, he said, the problem with Africa is, guess what he says? He says the problem with Africa is
staying too
long in power. Yeah, I mean, you can't. This man wrote his own.
Well, he hasn't stayed too long because he's still effective in his mind. So too long is subjective, you know. It's he hasn't stayed too long.
So yes, that said, that is that. The final story is one that we sort of looked at last week, but here is the Kenyan side of it, and it's about. It comes from Radio France International, and it's about stopping harmful tourism, the fight against Masai Mara's luxury hotel. In Kenya, Masai Mara, local people say a new luxury safari hotel is threatening the ecosystem and the livelihood for whom tourism was supposed to bring opportunity. There's a key part here. The money Naseku earns from her beads pay for her children's porridge and books. And when she manages it, clinic visits, which she often puts off. When they block the animals, they block us, she said in a low voice. We survive because the world comes to see what lives here. So down the road, somebody else says, leaned on a crooked fence post, his ambition is to be a wildlife guide, one who speaks about lions, migration circles, and Maasai history in the same breath. But the jobs are thin on the ground now. Conservatives are tightening rules, and the land is for grazing is shrinking. So, from a humanistic point of view, what is your thoughts? Yeah, I know. Yes.
You know, interestingly enough, I've been watching Khalees. Some of you may remember her as a R&B singer who was married to Nas. And she had a big hit. My milkshake brings all the boys to the yard.
Yeah.
Decades ago. But she moved to Africa 2 years ago, and she's been putting out these videos about different parts of Africa and what she's doing and so on and so forth. And I just recently saw a video where she was saying, hey, Black people, you need to come and buy land here because, you know, Ellen DeGeneres has land here. Bill Gates has land here. All of these white people are buying up all this land. We need to buy this land here. And I felt, as the people would say, some type of way watching it, because on the one hand, I do believe we should own our own land. Absolutely. But on the other hand, the question is, to what purpose? And so I also see a number of us here, you know, in the diaspora who are like, oh, we want to go visit the motherland. But when we visit the motherland, we want the 5-star hotels and we want all the amenities and all the comforts that we are used to and feel entitled to here in the West. And Africans like to show off, oh, look at our skyline. It's just like you were in Paris. Or look at this place. It's just like, but the question we need to be asking is, what made room for this? At the cost of what? You know, in the area that I live in, 16, almost 17 years ago when we moved here, there was so much green space. And literally in the middle of the afternoon, you would have to stop your car because the deer are passing and they'll look at you and they'll keep going. And now there's been so much commercialization and people are putting fences up. And on the main road on a daily basis, there are no less than 5 deer that are dead. And it looks like, oh, we're progressing and developing, but what does development really mean? And so as I was reading that, we have to go back to our values. I'm going to go back to the values, the Nguzo Saba values, and just say, what is it that we are aiming for and at what cost? And as they said in this article, once you block the pathway, because this proposed resort, tourism center, whatever, is actually going to block the migration path of the animals. Once you do that, you actually kill off the animals. Once you do that, you change the entire environment, the ecological balance. And then, of course, as we have gone through when we went through Kenya, different stories on Kenya, or if you watched our episode of Women in Resistance on Wangari Maathai, you see that once the ecosystem changes, you have scarcity of water, you have famine, you have increased droughts, desertification, all of that. Listen, people, where are we going to live after we have destroyed the entire earth? And so what many of us are viewing as development, oh, I've got to have all these comforts, this and that and that. It's killing us. I'm grateful for the gentleman who is mounting this fight. I hope that more people will put resources behind it because it takes money to fight.
Yeah.
But I also hope that those of us who are the consumers
will be much more savvy doing so.
Yes. Yeah. When you're going to these resorts in Caribbean or wherever, and you don't see, quote unquote, any of the indigenous people, they're actually not allowed to get on their own beaches because they've now been privatized just for you, this wealthy international traveler, to enjoy the comforts, not bothered by those pesky non-humans. You got to look at what role you are playing as well in all of this. Because we all have some power to make a difference. And if we brought our collective power together, cooperative economics, collective responsibility, we will see more changes for all of us wherever African people live. And when you see changes with us, it helps the entire world. So again, after we've cut down all the trees and we've put up all the high rises and we've, raped Mother Earth, then what?
Yeah. Then what? I mean, this story in particular, just changing the trajectory of those animals. Those animals have been moving for generations.
For centuries.
Yeah. Literally, they know when. If you watch National Geographic, you would see, you just need one to lift up its head to say it's time to move, and they all move. The animals that feed on them would move with them. What are they going to do? Their feces, their trampling will turn up the earth so that place where they've been can regenerate itself. So that by the time they come
that's
back
how seeds get trapped. That's how new plants grow. All of that. Yes.
Literally, nature telling you this is how we work. They trample. The crocodile feeds off the animals crossing, the weaklings. They are taken out of the group. The turnaround, by the time they come back in, there's another group. It's like we are constantly acting like the plug in the sink, just keeping dead water, holding dead water, and we call that progress. It is mind-boggling.
So the question is, where is the Kenyan government on this?
They want to build a grand hotel.
Where are our environmental? So, it's like, investment for what purpose? People, for what purpose? Yeah.
And it's
not like the man argued, you can have all of this, but when we lose the land, what do I leave to my grandchildren? Where do they live? We cannot eat and live concrete and glass and decor and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that said, thank you. And yes, we've come to the end of this week's episode of Women. Did I say Women in Resistance? Yes, we're going to have another episode of Women in Resistance Women in Resistance in the course of the week. And yes, and that would be with Kambasa. So it's Women in Resistance Kambasa this week, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But for this one, African News Review, we've come to the end of it. We hope the good comrade hears good news with regards to the person in the hospital, and our best wishes goes to that person. And love and thank you, everyone. Thank you, June, for the gift, and thank you all for coming through. If this is your first time here, this is what we do here. We reframe the narrative on articles that have been written about Africa, the Caribbean, and the larger African diaspora, even the United States, about Black people, wherever they are. So this is what we do here. We pass the news so that everybody gets a greater understanding of how it impacts them going forward. Until next week, sister.
Practice the Nguzo Saba. It'll save us.
And for me, it's a Luta Continua. The struggle continues. And thank you and good night and God bless.